Hey everybody, this is Off Leash with Erik Prince. I'm Mark Serrano. Erik, joining us from an undisclosed location over the Unplugged phone. You can take a look at unplugged.com/offleash to order your Unplugged phone today. Erik, the crisis in the Middle East grows and expands. As we've discussed, on April 1, Israel struck a building in Syria that was effectively an Iranian consulate, killing 7 Iranian officers from the IRGC. 12 days later, on the 13th, there was this fireworks show, we'll call it, where Iran attacked with 300 drones and missiles. It had a 99% failure rate. And then, only 6 days later, April 19th, there was a retaliatory strike from Israel, where it seems as if they struck in central Iran, near a nuclear facility and an air base, and it seemed to be sort of a limited retaliation. I've been looking forward to this conversation because I know that our viewers are going to love your breakdown of this crisis, where it's heading, and what we've just observed in terms of this strike, counterstrike, and counterstrike again.
So when the Israelis struck that facility in Syria, in Damascus, they hit the IRGC guy in charge of running Hezbollah, a very senior, very potent, important guy, and his cohort. This idea that Iran should be upset about striking a diplomatic or a so-called diplomatic facility, the reality is that was the office of their covert action wing, their paramilitary wing. Iran, for decades, has been smashing diplomatic facilities, including the U.S. Embassy in Beirut, including multiple Israeli diplomatic facilities, or other. They've been sponsoring attacks and damage to U.S. diplomatic facilities all over the world. So that they should be outraged about this.
That was just a red herring, right?
Yeah, exactly. They have no respect for any kind of diplomatic process, to include the very original Iranian Revolution, which seized the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and held 55 diplomats hostage for, 444 days until Reagan's election finally sprung them. So they can just shut up about, diplomacy.
It was a military target.
That was a military target, and they struck well. Now, when the Iranians struck back, I think it's like a total of 232 weapons that they fired. A combination, almost 50% of that number was drones, then some cruise missiles and some ballistic missiles. Many of the ballistic missiles failed to guide or failed to fully launch and hit boost phase. So many of those came down inside of Iran or other proxy states where they were launched from. The only damage that they succeeded doing inside of Israel was they put a hole in the runway or the ramp of an Israeli airfield in the Negev Desert in the south, and they managed to injure unfortunately a 7-year-old Arab Israeli girl. But that's the extent of the damage. And so for all the sound and fury, and look, they do that as a flex up to say, we are the real cock of the block in the Middle East, not Israel, and they do that as a warning to the other Gulf states, and I think that has a intimidating effect, because if Iran did that to one of the Gulf states, they would have problems. But the U.S. Has very good space-based radars, launch detection, etc. The drones that were flying, it's going to take hours for them to fly the kind of distances from Iran or from Yemen or from Iraq to get to any targets inside of Israel. And those ground-based radars, those space-based radars did a very effective job of detecting the launch, figuring out the trajectory, and able to vector in intercept capability of U.S. fighters. And obviously, it also indicated that radars located in Saudi, radars located in Jordan, contributed to the collection, early warning, targeting of those incoming strikes. So although it's Saudi Arabia does not have diplomatic relations with Israel, it's important to note that an unofficial source did acknowledge the kingdom's contribution to that, effectively that coalition, which knocked down that incoming Israeli attack.
Yeah, how effective is a strike like that if we have advance warning of hours before it actually reaches Israel?
Correct. I mean, I think back to when Qasem Soleimani was killed. Qasem Soleimani was the head of the IRGC, a very capable foe, which for years, I mean, that guy was sticking knives in the United States. He is the guy that built, that provided the explosive form penetrator, very nasty roadside bomb, which shoots effectively a metal slug at about 8,000 feet per second, and it would go through the side of tanks. It was responsible for killing hundreds, if not thousands, of Americans in Iraq. Qasem Soleimani did that, and Trump wisely took him out. And of course, that stunned the Iranians, stunned everybody in the whole region because someone finally had the balls to take him out. And when the Iranians did respond, they basically called ahead to the Trump administration and said, by the way, we have to respond. We're going to strike these bases and make sure your people in a bunker because we don't want to hurt anybody. I think this sound and fury attack by the Iranians have kind of the same fit and feel to this. And so now when the Israelis struck back after this big onslaught, I think the Israelis struck back, you said on the 19th.
Correct.
That I'd say will probably put a damper on any further major exchanges, and they'll go back to doing attacks on surrogates in the periphery, as has been the practice over the last few years. So I don't see it escalating much wider. I think overall it indicates a weakness in the Iranian regime. If until they get a nuke, they are extremely weak militarily. Despite their ability to put a lot of stuff in the air, it obviously did not have a whole lot of their desired effect on targets.
Yeah, I really wanted your insights about that, about what this reveals. What do we learn from this about their offensive and defensive conventional capabilities?
Yeah, on their offensive conventional capabilities is, they can put up P for plenty. When the Lebanese Hezbollah have 100,000 rockets and missiles in Lebanon, in the valley, in the terrain located right against Israel's border, that's a problem just because you could fire so many of those simultaneously that it starts to overwhelm Israel's ability to shoot those down. When you're launching an attack from a long ways away, from Iran, that gives you a lot greater a window to shoot those things down. Again, why does Lebanese Hezbollah not in a hurry to fire 100,000 weapons into the north of Israel? Because all of the Lebanese Shia Hezbollah areas of Lebanon would be annihilated. All the infrastructure would be destroyed, and a lot of people would die. On the conventional military ground capabilities, Iran doesn't have a lot. They haven't really invested there. They have invested in surrogates and unconventional ways to strike at targets because in a big conventional fight, they're not going to win.
But it is interesting for lay people to observe this and to see what appears like restraint on the part of Israel. Can you explain to us the sort of the psychological impact and sort of the PR effect that Israel's looking for without really delivering a dramatic blow?
When the Biden administration is publicly saying we are not backing any additional strikes by Israel into Iran, I think the Israelis realize they don't want to get that far out over their skis. Because also recently there was a vote at the UN to recognize Palestinian statehood, which was only stopped by a U.S. veto. And so they realize that they still have to adhere to limits placed on them by Washington on whatever they think they want to do militarily.
And with the on April 13th, that attack from Iran with the drones and the missiles, Israel was able to rely on her allies in their defense. The United States, the UK, I think maybe even France, helped with the missile defense, correct?
Yes, it's my understanding they had all those countries had aircraft in the air that were actually shooting down some of those incoming weapons headed for Israel. So that's a for the IDF to have a coalition of friends like that show up in a time of need was I think that's a good vote and a good backstop. But again, that's why I don't see IDF going further in pressing attacks inside because I don't see certainly the U.S., UK, or France eager to get into any kind of conventional exchange directly with Iran. And
Right.
look, this idea of and so any combat is going to be limited to air or missile stuff, long range standoff.
Right.
Invading
And
from a conventional side, anything inside of Iran, bad idea. History shows the natural geography of Iran is basically rung. It's a ring of mountains. The Zaragoza Mountains makes any kind of conventional operation inside of Iran extremely unwise.
and we already know that as it relates to any further offensive action by Israel, Biden has stated he won't back them up, which I now consider, Eric, the Dearborn Doctrine, right? For Dearborn,
Yes,
Michigan, where Joe Biden is going
dear
to play
well,
politics.
Dearbornistan.
Dearbornistan, right? Because Dearborn is far more important to Joe Biden than Tel Aviv.
That is correct.
So, all right, let's expand then briefly here about this, what you see as vulnerability and weakness on the part of Iran, how nukes could change that equation. So the restriction of their nuclear capability has never been more important, probably, and then the broader effects that all this will have on our energy markets.
Look, I think this shows the Iranian regime to be quite weak. If you think back to 2009, I think the Arab Spring, which started in 2011, but in 2009 you had major protests, millions of people on the streets in Iran
Right.
protesting the regime, and nothing from the then Obama administration. Crickets. Not we support Iranian freedom, we support women's
Right.
rights in Iran, we support none of that.
Not even rhetoric.
And the regime, not even
Right.
rhetoric, nothing. Nothing actual, but not even words, which they love to throw around.
Right.
And the regime at that point felt so vulnerable that they actually brought in Lebanese Hezbollah to Iran to crack heads against the people in the streets, which they did. And they killed their way to success staying in power. And they've had a lot of other protests rumbling since then. And in the last couple of years, they've had the Women Life Freedom protests, which are young girls, women, that don't want to have to wear an abaya and be veiled. And they want to be able to wear skirts or go to school and not have the constant mullah supervision and these morality police beating them or arresting them, or worse, beating these girls to death for wanting to live a more liberated lifestyle. And again, nothing from the Obama crowd, nothing from the Biden crowd. They're kind of one and the same in terms of people and paradigm.
Yeah.
Nothing from the Biden people supporting them. Like, we support women's rights in Iran. Nothing. They don't say that. So it's the regime in Iran is not popular at all. Those if they're playing videotapes of protests, those are absolutely paid regime sponsors. Those are probably government employees that are made to go protest. And so I'd say the foreign policy of the United States should be to support the Iranian people, just like the foreign policy of the United States during the Cold War was to support the people living in Poland and East Germany and Czechoslovakia and Hungary and Romania and Russia that wanted to live free and not live under a tyrannical, despotic regime.
Yeah, we're not even pro freedom. now for these people.
No, no, I don't understand the fact that the Biden team took sanctions off of Iran, and it puts $3 billion net per month into the hands of the mullahs. Don't forget, but in addition to the cash payments that were released by the Biden team, flying cash, pallets of cash to Iran, that's one thing. But the oil sales, they're netting $3 billion a month, which allows them to buy a lot of drones, a lot of rockets, a lot of cruise missiles to shoot at U.S. ships, U.S. bases, to kill Americans, and to shut down the Red Sea, and to do all the nonsense of surrogate hybrid warfare that they've been doing all over the Middle East. And so this attack, counterpunch by Iran, and then attack by Israel again, it really shows in many ways the Iranian regime is a paper tiger, and if properly confronted, would wilter and would wither and go away.
And because of the Dearborn Doctrine,
appropriately join its place on the dustbin of history.
Yeah, and because of the Dearborn Doctrine, they are now tolerating protests for the first time, by the way, where death to America is the chant. This is just a new phenomenon. We haven't seen this on the United States soil before. Death to America is a chant that the Biden administration is now tolerating. And the squad members and the extreme progressives in the House of Representatives, they won't even respond to a question of, well, do you support that or not?
It's interesting. I was recently at the completion exercise of a SEER course, Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape. And in that course, students have to, they're in a mock enemy prison camp where they're literally being made to chant death to America, like the enemy would do. And I think it's an interesting juxtaposition that whoever thought it was a good idea to bring people in from these countries to immigrate to America, that have embraced a death to America paradigm. We literally have the enemy that's been allowed in our midst, that is allowed to set up camp, and in many cases on federal subsidies, welfare programs, etc. And this is what runaway immigration practices from the Democrat administrations is brought to America. And that's a problem, and that has to be cleaned up.
Exit question for this segment, Erik. And I think on our last segment, we were talking about energy markets, the price of oil. I think it was $73, $74 at the time. And we were talking about it going to 90. And I think we were talking about it going to 90 by the summer. It's at $88 right now. These new developments in the Middle East, they're going to harm oil prices even further. Last word to you on this.
Yeah, and as much as the Biden team wants to try to ignore inflation and oil prices and force a green transformation, the fact is that's not happening anytime soon. And energy for normal America is a huge part of their costs. And oil prices were $55 a gallon when Donald Trump left office. Now we're almost 2x that. And that is an inflation tax that Americans will remember at the ballot box and deliver the proper consequences to the idiots that put us in this position.
Yeah, darn straight. It's the working man who's paying that extra tax. Look, this has been a fascinating breakdown and an analysis from Erik on the vulnerability that we now see in Iran, which has tremendous implications for the war ahead for Israel and for the United States and our national security interests. That's it for this segment of Off Leash with Erik Prince. I'm Mark Serrano. Until next time.